Welcome to History Teller YT, where the past is not just a collection of dates and events, but a living story that breathes through every corner of our world. Today, we invite you on a journey to the lush, complex, and often untold histories of Mindanao, a land of mountains, rivers, lakes, and deep cultural richness. Imagine a time when the island was a vast tapestry of tribes, each with its own customs, beliefs, and codes of life, yet all connected through one extraordinary family whose decisions would echo through generations. This is not a tale of simple conquests or generic legends. This is the story of 5 brothers: Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon, whose choices shaped the origins of every major tribe in Mindanao. From the arrival of the Arab missionary Shariff Kabunsuan, whose teachings brought the faith of Islam, to the resistance and preservation of ancestral customs in the mountains and highlands. This story is layered with courage, conflict, adaptation, and wisdom. You will witness how Mirilirilid's decision to seek freedom in the hinterlands gave rise to the Manobos and Bagobos, how Tabunaway's embrace of Islam transformed the Cotabato region and established the Maguindanaon Sultanate, how Mamalo's commitment to tradition ensured the survival of the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli, how Dumalandalan's warrior spirit birthed the Iranons and Maranaos, and how Gumabonabon's steadfast preservation of ancestral faith created the resilient Subanan tribe. Each segment of this history is carefully woven with stories of faith, warfare, diplomacy, leadership, and cultural preservation. You will explore the geographic spread of these tribes, their adaptation to diverse landscapes, from fertile plains to rugged highlands, how they integrated or resisted external influences, and how they maintained a sense of unity through shared ancestry, even in the face of colonization, conflict, and social change. This is a history of identity, survival, and intergenerational wisdom. By the end of this journey, you will not only understand the complex socio-cultural dynamics of Mindanao, but also appreciate the moral lessons embedded in their stories. Courage in adversity, the importance of cultural preservation, leadership guided by wisdom, and unity despite diversity. So, get comfortable, open your mind, and prepare to immerse yourself in the extraordinary history of Mindanao and the 5 brothers whose legacy continues to shape generations. Welcome to History Teller YT, your gateway to the stories that history forgot to tell but cannot be forgotten. In the middle of the 16th century, the sun rose over the wide, shimmering waters of Cotabato, illuminating a land lush with green hills and dense forests. Fishermen in their small wooden boats were already casting nets into the calm sea, while the smoke of morning fires drifted from riverside villages. This land, rich in natural resources and alive with the songs of birds and rustle of the forest, was home to the family of Tabunaway and his 4 brothers: Mirilirilid, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon. Their tribe had lived in harmony with the land for generations. Guided by ancient customs and the reverence of spirits, they believed inhabited every tree, river, and mountain. It was during this peaceful period that a new presence arrived: Shariff Kabunsuan, an Arab missionary whose journey had been long and perilous. He had crossed seas, weathered storms, and sailed under the burning sun, all driven by a mission to bring the teachings of Islam to distant lands. When his small fleet of sailboats reached the shores of Cotabato, he was greeted not with fear, but with curiosity. Tabunaway, known for his wisdom and openness, welcomed the stranger, offering food and shelter. The villagers gathered at the shore, watching as the Arab missionary performed his prayers and spoke of a faith centered on one God, discipline, and communal harmony. The arrival of Shariff Kabunsuan marked a turning point for Mindanao. His teachings included guidance on daily life, spiritual purification, and social justice. Yet, this foreign faith also challenged the traditions that had defined the people for centuries. For the brothers of Tabunaway, the message resonated differently. Some were drawn to the new customs, while others resisted, their hearts tied to ancestral ways and the spirits of their forebears. Among them, Tabunaway was deeply moved. He saw in Shariff Kabunsuan a path to strengthen the people and unify them under a moral code that promised both spiritual and temporal leadership. But acceptance was not universal. The elder brother, Mirilirilid, had always been restless, yearning for freedom and independence. He had wandered beyond the familiar lands of Cotabato, seeking to carve a space where his people could live without restriction. Mirilirilid's heart was tied to the old ways, honoring nature, ancestral spirits, and the unwritten laws that governed their communities. When Shariff Kabunsuan's teachings arrived, he chose to remain distant, observing but never embracing the new faith. Meanwhile, the other three brothers, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon, faced their own crossroads. Mamalo, though respectful of his younger brother and the missionary, preferred a life of quiet reflection in the highlands. He valued harmony with nature and preserving the traditions of their ancestors. Dumalandalan, with his fiery spirit and warrior nature, found himself intrigued by the structure and strength that Islam offered. For him, the faith promised not only spiritual guidance, but also the tools to protect his people and lead in times of conflict. Gumabonabon, the youngest, embodied the fierce independence that would define the Subanen. He rejected the missionaries' teachings outright, viewing them as a challenge to the freedom and customs that had guided their people for generations. He clung to the worship of the spirit Megayep and resisted any attempt to change their diet, rituals, or governance. This division of belief, rooted in the personalities and principles of the five brothers, would ultimately lay the foundation for the diverse tribes of Mindanao, each following a path carved by the choices of their ancestors. The days that followed Shariff Kabunsuan's arrival were filled with dialogue, debate, and cautious exploration. Tabunaway studied the teachings intently, adopting rituals that emphasized cleanliness, charity, and spiritual devotion. He led ceremonies alongside Shariff Kabunsuan, welcoming new followers and spreading the faith along the riverbanks and villages of Cotabato. Villagers who joined were instructed on the daily prayers, dietary laws, and the importance of community unity under the guidance of Islam. Yet, tension simmered beneath the surface. Mirilirilid continued to retreat to the hinterlands, quietly gathering those who preferred the ancestral ways. Mamalo and Gumabonabon observed cautiously, choosing separate paths to protect their own beliefs. Dumalandalan began training young warriors in both the traditional ways and the emerging practices of Islam, forging a new identity that combined spiritual devotion with martial discipline. This initial encounter between Shariff Kabunsuan and the five brothers would reverberate through generations. It was the first moment when Mindanao began to split along lines of faith and culture, yet remained connected by blood. The story of these brothers, their choices, and their legacies would eventually become the tapestry from which the tribes of Mindanao emerged, a testament to resilience, identity, and the enduring influence of one family. Mirilirilid, the eldest of the five brothers, was a man of restless spirit and unyielding independence. Unlike Tabunaway, who welcomed the teachings of Shariff Kabunsuan, or Dumalandalan, who balanced the old and new ways, Mirilirilid had always been drawn to freedom and self-determination. When a missionary arrived, and the river valleys began to hum with prayers and new laws, He felt the pull of the untouched lands beyond Cotabato. With a small band of loyal followers, he left the familiar settlements, venturing deep into the dense forests and rolling highlands of what would later become Davao Province. The journey was arduous. Thick jungles, towering mountains, and wild rivers challenged every step. Mirilirilid and his followers depended on their knowledge of the land, reading signs from animal tracks, the flight of birds, and the flow of rivers. They built temporary shelters from bamboo and palm leaves, moving with the seasons, hunting, fishing, and cultivating small patches of taro and yam. This migration was not just physical. It was a spiritual journey, a deliberate choice to preserve the customs and beliefs that had guided their ancestors for centuries. As they traveled, Mirilirilid shared stories of their lineage, recounting tales of their parents and the spirits that protected their family. These stories became the foundation of the culture he would establish in the hinterlands. Children learned to respect nature, to honor the sacred rivers, mountains, and forests, and to carry forward the rituals that defined their identity. By forging a path away from the influence of Kabunsuan, Mirilirilid ensured that his descendants would maintain the traditions and values of the people before the arrival of foreign faiths. Upon reaching the fertile valleys of Davao, Mirilirilid and his followers began to settle. They chose locations near rivers, which provided water, fish, and fertile soil for agriculture. Over time, these settlements grew into thriving communities. Mirilirilid organized his people into clans, each led by elders who embodied wisdom, strength, and fairness. The elders mediated disputes, oversaw rituals, and guided the community in daily life. From these settlements emerged the Manobos, a group defined by their connection to the land and their skill in both hunting and farming. The Manobos cultivated rice terraces along the hillsides, fished in rivers, and hunted in forests, all while maintaining elaborate rituals that honored the spirits of ancestors and nature. These practices ensured balance and prosperity, teaching generations to live in harmony with the environment. Further into the southern reaches, Mirilirilid's followers encountered other indigenous groups with whom they intermarried, learned new techniques, and exchanged cultural practices. From this blending emerged the Bagobos, a tribe known for their artistry, rich oral traditions, and strong community bonds. The Bagobos became skilled in weaving, wood carving, and ritual dance, all while preserving the values taught by Mirilirilid. Through careful leadership, Mirilirilid transformed the wilderness into a network of thriving communities, each retaining its autonomy, but united under shared customs, values, and respect for nature. Mirilirilid's choice to flee the influence of Shariff Kabunsuan did more than preserve traditions. It created a lineage of resilience and autonomy that would define the Manobo and Bagobo tribes for centuries. While other brothers navigated the waters of faith, conquest, and diplomacy, Mirilirilid's descendants focused on survival, harmony, and mastery of their environment. This autonomy allowed them to resist outside influence for generations, maintaining the rituals, oral histories, and governance structures of their ancestors. Stories of Mirilirilid's wisdom and courage were passed down through generations. Children learned the importance of protecting the forests, rivers, and sacred mountains, understanding that their survival depended not only on strength, but also on respect for the spiritual world. The Manobos and Bagobos became adept at defending their lands from intruders, using knowledge of the terrain and guerrilla tactics refined over decades. By the time colonial powers and new religions began to spread across Mindanao, the communities established by Mirilirilid had already developed a strong sense of identity and unity. The tribes maintained their heritage, keeping alive the customs, rituals, and oral histories that connected them to the land and to each other. Through his journey into the hinterlands, Mirilirilid secured a legacy of freedom and resilience, ensuring that his people would endure independent and proud, long after the brothers had chosen separate paths. Tabunaway, the second eldest of the 5 brothers, was a man of both courage and foresight. Unlike Mirilirilid, who valued independence above all, Tabunaway recognized the potential of Shariff Kabunsuan's teachings. When the Arab missionary arrived in Cotabato, bringing with him the principles of Islam, Tabunaway was immediately drawn to the faith's emphasis on unity, discipline, and moral conduct. The teachings resonated with him not only spiritually but also politically, for he understood that embracing Islam could unify the people of Cotabato under a single guiding authority. The conversion was not instantaneous. Tabunaway observed the rituals, studied the prayers, and sought counsel from Shariff Kabunsuan. He learned the importance of daily worship, the value of fasting during Ramadan, and the rules that govern social behavior, trade, and justice. His devotion became evident to the people around him. He led by example, showing respect for the faith and embodying the principles of integrity, courage, and justice. Over time, he became a key ally to Shariff Kabunsuan, supporting the missionary's mission to teach Islam and establish a community guided by spiritual and ethical laws. Tabunaway's leadership transformed the local society. He encouraged his people to adopt the practices of Islam gradually, blending the new faith with existing cultural norms. Villagers were instructed in the art of prayer, proper conduct, and the importance of communal harmony. This careful guidance ensured that conversion was not forced but accepted, creating a foundation of trust and loyalty between the leader, the missionary, and the people. With Tabunaway's leadership and Shariff Kabunsuan's guidance, Cotabato gradually evolved into a structured and organized society. The new Muslim communities flourished along the riverbanks, where fertile land allowed for rice cultivation, fishing, and trade. Tabunaway's ability to unite people under a common faith strengthened social cohesion and laid the groundwork for political authority. The influence of Islam extended beyond religious practice. It became a code of governance, justice, and leadership. As the Muslim community expanded, Tabunaway's descendants began to consolidate power, forming what would later become the Maguindanaon Sultanate. The Sultanate's system of governance incorporated principles of Islamic law while maintaining the local customs and leadership structures that had guided the people for generations. Trade routes were established along rivers, connecting Cotabato to neighboring regions and fostering economic growth. Merchants, warriors, and scholars traveled to and from Cotabato, bringing new knowledge, techniques, and ideas. The Maguindanaons became renowned not only for their devotion to Islam, but also for their skill in diplomacy and warfare. Tabunaway himself led expeditions to secure alliances and defend the territory from external threats. His leadership was characterized by a balance of wisdom and strength, blending spiritual guidance with strategic foresight. Through his vision, the Maguindanaon people emerged as a dominant force in Mindanao, wielding influence over both the river valleys and surrounding highlands. The rise of the Maguindanaon Sultanate under Tabunaway's guidance brought not only political stability, but also cultural development. Islamic traditions, including elaborate ceremonies, poetry, music, and architecture, became integral to daily life. Mosques were constructed along the riverbanks, often near marketplaces, serving as both religious and social centers. Scholars and clerics arrived from neighboring regions, enriching the spiritual and intellectual life of the community. Tabunaway's descendants inherited not only his leadership, but also his commitment to balancing faith with local identity. Festivals celebrated both Islamic holidays and local customs, creating a unique cultural synthesis. The people of Cotabato were skilled in weaving, boat building, and crafting intricate metalwork, reflecting a blend of local ingenuity and Islamic influence. Their warriors were trained to defend the Sultanate, embodying courage and loyalty instilled by Tabunaway himself. Even as centuries passed, Tabunaway's legacy endured. His vision of a unified, spiritually guided society shaped the social and political landscape of Mindanao. The Maguindanan Sultanate became a symbol of cultural resilience, faith, and leadership. The story of Tabunaway illustrates how a single individual's devotion and strategic foresight can influence generations, creating a lasting impact that continues to define the identity of a people. Through his choice to embrace Islam, Tabunaway ensured that the Maguindanans would thrive, standing as a testament to the enduring power of faith, leadership, and unity. Mamalo, the third brother of the 5 siblings, was a man of quiet wisdom and deep connection to the land. Unlike Tabunaway, who embraced the teachings of Shariff Kabunsuan or Dumalandalan, whose fiery spirit drove him toward martial and religious pursuits, Mamalo was drawn to the serenity of the highlands. When a missionary arrived, Mamalo respected the teachings but chose a different path, one that prioritized harmony with nature, preservation of ancestral traditions, and spiritual independence. He settled in the hills of Leia, Cotabato, an area of rolling landscapes, dense forests, and clear mountain streams. These highlands were rich in flora and fauna, providing both sustenance and spiritual grounding for his community. Mamalo's followers built homes from bamboo and palm leaves, planted terrace gardens, and hunted only what was necessary for survival. The highlands became a sanctuary, a place where people could live free from the pressures of conversion and external influence. In this secluded setting, Mamalo emphasized respect for ancestral spirits, teaching that the mountains, rivers, and trees were living entities that demanded reverence. Rituals were performed regularly to honor these spirits, offering prayers and gifts to ensure harmony and protection. The community thrived under Mamalo's leadership, guided by the principles of cooperation, respect, and balance. His influence was subtle but profound, nurturing a culture that valued wisdom, environmental stewardship, and the preservation of identity through oral history and ritual practice. Over time, Mamalo's settlement became the foundation for several highland tribes. The Mandaya, one of the earliest communities, were renowned for their elaborate rituals, artistry, and agricultural practices. Terraced fields spread across the hillsides, while dense forests provided game and medicinal plants. Mandaya elders carefully transmitted stories of the ancestors, embedding in each generation a deep sense of identity and connection to the land. Through interaction and intermarriage with neighboring communities, the cultural influence of Mamalo's people extended further. The Blaan and Taboli tribes, known for their artistic excellence, weaving, brasswork, and intricate rituals, were shaped by these early highland settlements. Mamalo's teachings emphasized the importance of balance, respect for nature, and adherence to traditional laws. These values ensured that even as trade and contact with lowland communities increased, the highland peoples retained their distinct identity. Mamalo's role as a mediator between tradition and change was crucial. He encouraged practical adaptation while preserving core spiritual beliefs. For example, his people learned to cultivate new crops introduced from lower valleys while continuing ancestral rites to honor the land spirits. Festivals, dances, and ceremonial rites were conducted to mark planting, harvest, and significant life events. These cultural practices, rooted in Mamalo's leadership, became central to the identity of the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli tribes, ensuring that their ancestral heritage would endure for generations. Mamalo's influence went beyond the material and cultural. It instilled in his people a philosophy of resilience and harmony. In the highlands, where isolation demanded self-reliance, he taught that wisdom, courage, and respect for nature were more vital than martial conquest or religious conformity. His teachings emphasized listening to elders, understanding the cycles of the land, and honoring spiritual connections through rituals and ceremonies. The preservation of these traditions allowed his descendants to maintain autonomy, even as other regions of Mindanao experienced conversion, colonization, and conflict. The Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli became known for their intricate beadwork, weaving, music, and storytelling, all practices rooted in the values Mamalo upheld. They also maintained a warrior ethic, not for conquest, but for protection of their lands and way of life. Mamalo's legacy serves as a testament to the strength of cultural preservation. In an era of expanding influence from external forces, whether Islamic missionaries, traders, or later colonial powers, his decision to prioritize ancestral wisdom ensured that the Highland tribes remained deeply connected to their heritage. The teachings, stories, and rituals passed down through generations became the backbone of these communities, demonstrating that leadership and influence could flourish not only through conquest, but through preservation, guidance, and the nurturing of identity. Dumalandalan, the fourth brother, was a man defined by his strength, courage, and unyielding sense of purpose. Unlike Mirilirilid, who sought freedom in the hinterlands, or Mamalo, who preserved ancestral ways in the highlands, Dumalandalan found his destiny in the lowlands and lake regions of Mindanao. He was drawn to both the teachings of Shariff Kabunsuan and the strategic possibilities they presented. For Dumalandalan, Islam was not only a path of faith, but also a means to strengthen his people, consolidate power, and defend the communities that embraced this new guidance. He settled near the vast lakes of Lanio, a region of stunning natural beauty with deep waters, fertile shores, and mountains rising like guardians around the lake's perimeter. Here, Dumalandalan trained warriors, taught martial skills, and organized the community into a disciplined society. He balanced spiritual guidance with military strategy, recognizing that survival in Mindanao required both faith and strength. Villagers were trained in self-defense, watercraft navigation, and tactical formations, preparing them to protect their homes from raids and rival groups. Dumalandalan's embrace of Islam was wholehearted. He performed prayers, led communal worship, and followed the religious laws meticulously. His commitment inspired loyalty among his followers and respect among neighboring communities. Through his leadership, Dumalandalan established a society where faith and discipline were inseparable, cultivating a culture that valued courage, devotion, and artistic expression, while simultaneously building a reputation for formidable strength and strategic prowess. Dumalandalan's settlement around Lanio gradually evolved into the foundations of two distinct yet connected communities, the Iranons and the Maranaos. The Iranons, who settled along the loch shores and surrounding highlands, were shaped by Dumalandalan's emphasis on martial skill, spiritual devotion, and cultural artistry. They developed complex social structures, weaving, metalwork, and traditional music that reflected both their warrior ethos and deep religious devotion. Meanwhile, the Maranaos, named for their connection to the lake, Ranao meaning lake in their language, grew into a powerful and sophisticated society. Dumalandalan's vision of disciplined governance and communal unity transformed the region into a thriving polity. The Maranaos became adept in both agriculture and fishing, using the lake's abundant resources while maintaining a strong defensive system along the shores. Their leaders, chosen for both piety and wisdom, embodied the values Dumalandalan instilled: courage in battle, loyalty to faith, and dedication to communal prosperity. Interactions between the Iranons and Maranaos were complex. They shared rituals, intermarried, and exchanged cultural practices, but each maintained unique identities. Dumalandalan's leadership ensured that his descendants could flourish in both communities, preserving their autonomy while embedding the core principles of Islam, warrior ethics, and cultural richness. The lakes became not just a source of sustenance, but a symbol of resilience, spiritual depth, and the interconnectedness of faith, land, and people. The communities established by Dumalandalan became renowned for their warrior culture. Boys were trained from a young age in the arts of combat, strategy, and defense, but these skills were always coupled with spiritual education. The values of honor, respect for elders, and adherence to Islamic principles were as important as physical strength and tactical skill. Festivals and rituals reflected this duality, celebrating both martial prowess and devotion to God. The Maranaos built strong houses, defensive structures, and boats to navigate the lake efficiently. They developed an intricate legal system rooted in Islamic law, balancing justice with mercy. Artisans produced brasswork, textiles, and decorative items, often used in both ceremonial and everyday life. Music, dance, and oral storytelling thrived, preserving history, moral lessons, and the exploits of Dumalandalan and his descendants. Through generations, the legacy of Dumalandalan endured. The Iranons and Maranaos became influential communities in Mindanao, renowned for both cultural sophistication and military strength. Dumalandalan's vision created societies that balanced faith, artistry, and defense, proving that true leadership requires wisdom, courage, and the ability to inspire loyalty. The lakes of Lanao and the surrounding highlands remain, to this day, a testament to his enduring influence, a living symbol of resilience, devotion, and the warrior spirit of his people. Gumabonabon, the youngest of the 5 brothers, was a man fiercely loyal to the traditions of his ancestors. While Tabunaway embraced Islam, Dumalandalan integrated faith with warfare, and Mamalo preserved ancestral rituals in the highlands. Gumabonabon remained resolute in the old ways. The arrival of Shariff Kabunsuan, along with the introduction of new customs, daily prayers, washing rituals, and a prohibition of pork, was seen by Gumabonabon as a threat to the identity, freedom, and spiritual practices of his people. Refusing conversion, Gumabonabon became the guardian of ancestral knowledge and the spiritual customs of Mindanao. His belief in Megayep, the ancestral spirit, guided his decisions and shaped his community's values. He taught that the spirits of the mountains, rivers, and forests were sacred and must be honored. Hunting, farming, and daily life were conducted with rituals that connected the people to the natural and spiritual worlds. Every harvest, every hunting expedition, every birth and marriage was accompanied by ceremonies that reinforced communal bonds and respect for tradition. Realizing that remaining near Cotabato could invite conflict with his brothers or missionaries, Gumabonabon made a decisive choice. He would lead his followers away from the river valleys, seeking refuge in the uncharted mountains and forests where his people could live freely. His journey was difficult. The terrain was rugged, filled with dense jungles, steep cliffs, and treacherous rivers. Yet his determination to preserve the ancestral way of life guided every step. He became not only a leader, but a symbol of resistance, embodying independence, courage, and unwavering loyalty to tradition. Gumabonabon and his followers moved westward, crossing river valleys, traversing hills, and finally reaching the mountainous regions of Mount Malandang and Misamis and the Zamboanga Peninsula. These highland jungles were isolated, rich in wildlife, and difficult to access, making them the perfect sanctuary for a people determined to preserve their customs. Here, Gumabonabon established the foundations of what would become the Sabanan, or Sabanan, tribe. The Sabanan communities were carefully organized under Gumabonabon's leadership. Settlements were constructed in harmony with the environment, using materials sourced sustainably from the surrounding forests. Villagers cultivated rice, root crops, and vegetables on terraced slopes, while hunting and fishing supplemented their diet. Life was communal. Elders taught children the traditions, stories, and moral codes passed down through generations. Rituals to honor Megayep and other ancestral spirits punctuated the seasons, ensuring spiritual harmony and continuity. Gumabonabon's leadership also emphasized defense and autonomy. Unlike other regions where external influences, Islamic or Christian, would assert control, the Sabanan lived independently, resistant to outside domination. They developed sophisticated knowledge of the terrain, learned to navigate the forests efficiently, and maintained a system of leadership that balanced authority and communal consensus. This autonomy allowed the Sabanan to retain their customs, language, and spiritual practices for centuries, ensuring that the lineage of Gumabonabon remained unbroken and their culture preserved. Under Gumabonabon's guidance, the Sabanan evolved into skilled guardians of both land and tradition. He fathered two sons, Dageneg and Dajending, who continued his mission. Dageneg became a warrior, protecting the highland territories and training militias, while Dajending's line preserved leadership, guiding communities in accordance with ancestral principles. From this lineage emerged prominent Sabanan leaders whose influence would shape the social, spiritual, and cultural identity of the tribe for generations. Gumabonabon's community became known for its resilience. Isolated from major political and religious powers, the Sabanan maintained independence, preserving rituals that honored nature and their forebears. Ceremonial rites, oral histories, and sacred practices were meticulously passed down, ensuring that each generation understood their heritage. Even when the Spanish arrived centuries later, the Sabanan resisted assimilation, demonstrating the enduring strength of Gumabonabon's vision. By prioritizing ancestral faith, communal cohesion, and environmental harmony, Gumabonabon ensured that the Sabanan remained distinct and independent. His legacy endures in the forests and mountains he once traversed, in the rituals and stories that continue to shape Sabanan identity, and in the enduring spirit of resistance, freedom, and fidelity to tradition. He is remembered as the father of the Sabanan, a guardian of ancestral wisdom, and a symbol of the unyielding connection between a people and their land. Gumabonabon's legacy was carried forward through his two sons, Dageneg and Dajending, each embodying aspects of their father's vision and values. Dageneg, the elder, inherited his father's warrior spirit. From a young age, he trained in the arts of survival and defense, learning to navigate the rugged forests, climb steep mountains, and move silently along hidden paths. His skills were not solely for hunting. They were essential for protecting the fledgling communities from external threats and asserting the independence of the Sabanan people. Dajending, the younger, demonstrated a different strength. While not as inclined toward martial pursuits, he excelled in leadership, organization, and preserving the social and spiritual cohesion of their people. He was meticulous in teaching the Sabanan traditions, ensuring that every child every family and every elder understood their responsibilities and heritage. Dajending's leadership emphasized consensus, respect for elders, and a harmonious management of resources. Through him, the lineage of Gumabonabon became more than a bloodline. It became a structure for cultural survival, a system that balanced defense, spirituality, and governance. Together, the brothers divided responsibilities according to their strengths. Dageneg led patrols and trained militias to safeguard the highlands. He became a legendary figure among the Subanen, known for bravery and strategic skill in defending the forests and settlements. Dagending, meanwhile, focused on preserving the spiritual and cultural foundations. His line would eventually produce the Imbings of Lapuyan, who became central figures in Subanen history, blending governance, culture, and diplomacy to maintain the tribe's autonomy. From Dajending's line came a succession of leaders whose names were etched into Subanen history: Balas, Baan, Palyalai, Habali, Bongulan, Pamazan, Samaya, Lehewan, and Sanaira. Each of these leaders played a crucial role in guiding their communities through periods of growth, migration, and external threats. The line of succession was not merely hereditary. It was earned through wisdom, courage, and the ability to maintain unity among clans scattered across the highlands and valleys. Sanaira, one of the most prominent figures in this lineage, relocated the settlement to Salug Valley, now known as Molavi in Zamboanga del Sur. His marriage to a woman from Damankalas, Margot Satibig, strengthened alliances and expanded the Subanen's influence. Sanaira's descendants, including the renowned warrior Palaganding, became legendary for their courage and ability to defend the tribe's independence. Palaganding's reputation spread across the mountains and valleys, inspiring loyalty and fear alike. Stories of his exploits, sometimes exaggerated in oral histories, emphasized the ferocity and tactical genius of Subanen warriors while reinforcing the tribe's spiritual connection to the land. The leadership of these generations was deeply intertwined with spiritual guidance. Elders and leaders performed rituals to honor Megayep and other ancestral spirits, ensuring that every decision, from settling a dispute to organizing a defense, adhered to the tribe's moral and spiritual framework. This blend of governance, spirituality, and martial prowess allowed the Subanen to thrive in relative isolation while maintaining the integrity and continuity of Gumabonabon's vision. Palaganding, one of Sanaira's descendants, became a symbol of Subanen's strength and resilience. His name was feared among enemies and revered among allies. Tales of his courage circulated throughout the mountains and forests of Zamboanga, Pingolis, and Damankalas, often describing his strategic brilliance in battle and unwavering commitment to protecting his people. It is said that Palaganding's leadership ensured that the Subanen maintained their autonomy, resisting both the influence of Islam and Christianity, preserving traditions that had been passed down from Gumabonabon himself. From Palaganding's lineage came Lamong, whose son Imbing rose as one of the greatest Subanen leaders. Under their guidance, the Subanen expanded their territory, strengthened communal bonds, and continued to practice ancestral rituals with devotion. Their settlements became centers of both cultural preservation and strategic defense, ensuring that the community could withstand external pressures and internal conflict alike. The legacy of Dageneg, Dagending, and Palaganding illustrates the enduring impact of Gumabonabon's choice to preserve tradition. Through generations of leaders, the Subanen maintained autonomy, spiritual integrity, and a sense of identity rooted in their connection to the mountains, forests, and ancestral spirits. The bloodline of Gumabonabon became the foundation upon which the Subanen tribe's resilience, culture, and pride were built, carrying forward the principles of freedom courage, and reverence for the land. Timue Imbing, descendant of Lamong and Palaganding, was born into a lineage steeped in the traditions, resilience, and warrior culture of the Sabanan people. From a young age, he was taught the history of his tribe, the stories of Gumabonabon's flight to the mountains, the establishment of settlements in Mount Malandang and Salug Valley, and the battles fought by his ancestors to preserve their independence. Every lesson, ritual, and oral tradition instilled in Imbing a profound sense of duty to protect his people, their culture, and the sacred lands they had inhabited for centuries. The arrival of the American colonial forces in Mindanao in the early 20th century presented new challenges. The Sabanan, like other indigenous communities, faced pressure to submit to foreign authority and abandon some of their traditional practices. Timue Imbing recognized the danger. The autonomy of his people was at risk, and their lands could be exploited if left unprotected. With courage, intelligence, and strategic insight, he began to organize the Sabanan into a disciplined community capable of defending itself, while simultaneously engaging with American authorities in negotiations to secure recognition of their ancestral rights. Imbing's leadership was characterized by a unique blend of diplomacy, strategy, and martial skill. He understood the value of alliances, carefully balancing relationships with neighboring tribes, such as the Iranons, while maintaining Sabanan independence. He also reinforced cultural and spiritual practices, ensuring that each generation remained connected to Megayep and the ancestral rituals that had guided their people for centuries. Under Imbing, the Sabanan were not just surviving, they were thriving, holding on to their traditions while navigating a changing political landscape. One of the defining moments of Timue Imbing's leadership was the Battle of Mt. Gillian, a conflict that tested the resolve and military prowess of the Sabanan. The battle arose from tensions with neighboring Iranon groups, who had historical disputes over territory, resources, and influence in the region. While the Iranons were formidable warriors, the Sabanan under Imbing's command had the advantage of intimate knowledge of the terrain and the strategic use of forests, rivers, and mountain passes. Imbing meticulously planned the defense of Sabanan settlements. He trained warriors in ambush tactics, movement under cover, and coordinated attacks. Every detail, from signaling methods to the placement of scouts, was carefully considered. On the day of battle, the Sabanan warriors executed Imbing's strategies flawlessly, utilizing the mountain's natural features to gain the upper hand. Despite being outnumbered, the Sabanan emerged victorious, securing their territory and demonstrating the effectiveness of discipline, preparation, and unity. The victory at Mt. Gillian cemented Timue Imbing's reputation as a fearless leader. Stories of his tactical genius and bravery spread throughout Mindanao, earning him respect not only among the Sabanan, but also among neighboring tribes and American officials. The battle symbolized more than a military success. It represented the enduring resilience of the Sabanan people, their ability to defend their culture, and the strategic vision of a leader deeply rooted in ancestral wisdom. Following the victory at Mt. Gillian, Timue Imbing's contributions were recognized by the American authorities. Governor General Leonard Wood, impressed by the Sabanan's resilience and Imbing's leadership, named a prominent mountain after him, Mt. Imbing. From the skies, General Wood also observed the pristine beauty of the Sabanan territories, naming the area Lakewood in honor of the surrounding lakes and rivers. These recognitions marked a rare acknowledgement of Sabanan autonomy and the leadership of their Timue. Imbing continued to guide his people with a balance of tradition and diplomacy. His children, Kaloi, Lumak, Purok, Kalit, Kalangian, and Sindium, were trained in leadership, spiritual guidance, and community management, ensuring that the Sabanan legacy would endure. The The practice of anointing tribal rulers, which had been central to Sabanan governance, eventually ceased under missionary influence, but the values of courage, independence, and spiritual devotion continued to define the community. Timue Imbing's life exemplifies the strength of leadership rooted in ancestral wisdom and commitment to community. Through diplomacy, military strategy, and cultural preservation, he ensured that the Sabanan remained independent, respected, and spiritually connected. His legacy endures not only in the mountains, forests, and settlements he protected, but also in the stories, rituals, and cultural identity passed down to generations. Imbing stands as a symbol of resilience, leadership, and the enduring power of heritage in shaping the destiny of people. Following the legendary Timue Imbing, the Sabanan leadership passed to his descendants, who inherited not only the lands, but the responsibilities of guiding a resilient and independent people. Among these successors was Timue Bong Imbing, who carried forward the legacy of courage, diplomacy, and spiritual guidance established by his forefathers. Timue Bong Imbing faced challenges different from those of his ancestors. The American colonial presence had established a new political order. Missionaries were active in the region, and neighboring tribes continued to interact with increasing frequency. Despite these changing dynamics, Timue Bong Imbing maintained the authority and influence of the Sabanan. He oversaw the communities with a combination of ancestral tradition and practical adaptation to contemporary pressures. Village elders and leaders under him were carefully chosen for their wisdom, commitment to tribal laws, and ability to represent the community in negotiations with outsiders. Festivals, rituals, and ceremonies continued, preserving the spiritual connection to Megayep and other ancestral spirits, ensuring that even as external influences grew stronger, the core identity of the Sabanan remained intact. Timue Bong Imbing also emphasized education in both traditional knowledge and new skills introduced by missionaries and colonial authorities. Young leaders were trained in governance, community organization, and resource management while retaining their understanding of cultural practices, ancestral rituals, and martial skills. This dual approach enabled the Sabanan to navigate a complex socio-political environment while continuing to thrive in their ancestral territories. Following Timue Bong Imbing, leadership eventually passed to Datu Purok Imbing, the last Sabanan leader to be anointed according to traditional customs. The anointing process, which had been a cornerstone of Sabanan governance, symbolized the continuity of authority, the blessing of the spirits, and the legitimacy of leadership. Datu Purok Imbing's reign marked a turning point in Sabanan history. Missionary influence was becoming more pervasive, gradually altering traditional governance structures. Despite these pressures, Datu Purok Imbing upheld the values of his ancestors. He ensured that the elders retained their voice in decision-making, that the spiritual practices were observed, and that the community's autonomy was respected. During his leadership, the Sabanan communities faced both internal challenges, such as disputes among clans, and external threats from colonial policies and neighboring groups. Through careful mediation, strategic alliances, and adherence to ancestral wisdom, Datu Purok maintained stability and unity among the Sabanan. Datu Purok Imbing's leadership also emphasized preserving cultural heritage. Ceremonial practices, storytelling, and traditional arts were actively supported and passed down to younger generations. This ensured that even as formal anointing of leaders ceased, the principles of Sabanan governance, justice, spirituality, courage, and community cohesion remained strong. He symbolized the final chapter of an era where leadership was deeply rooted in both bloodline and spiritual recognition, bridging the past and the evolving present. The succession of leaders from Timue Imbing to Timue Bong Imbing and finally to Datu Purok Imbing illustrates the continuity and resilience of Sabanan governance and cultural identity. Each generation faced unique challenges, yet all adhered to the principles established by Gumabonabon and strengthened by subsequent leaders. Respect for ancestral traditions, spiritual devotion, martial preparedness, and communal harmony. Even after the cessation of formal anointing rituals, the Sabanan continued to honor the leadership structure informally. Elders, clan heads, and influential families maintained their roles in decision-making, mediating disputes, organizing communal projects, and ensuring the preservation of spiritual practices. Rituals, festivals, and oral histories remained central to the community, reinforcing identity and continuity. The bloodline of leadership, though no longer officially recognized by external authorities, continued to symbolize the unity and heritage of the Sabanan people. The story of these leaders exemplifies the balance between tradition and adaptation. Through their vision, guidance, and courage, the Sabanan navigated colonization, missionary influence, and political changes without losing their essence. The legacy of leadership serves as a testament to the enduring power of cultural identity, resilience, and ancestral wisdom, ensuring that the Sabanan remained a distinct and proud people in the highlands and mountains of Mindanao. The story of Mindanao cannot be told without acknowledging the pivotal role of the five brothers: Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon. Each brother's choices shaped not only their own destinies, but also the cultural, spiritual, and political landscapes of the entire island. Mirilirilid's flight to the Devo hinterlands gave rise to the Manobos and Bagobos, who would preserve ancient traditions and maintain a deep connection to the land. Tabunaway's embrace of Islam laid the foundation for the Maguindanaon Sultanate, a society renowned for its political organization, spirituality, and strategic influence along the Cotabato River plains. Mamalo's commitment to ancestral ways ensured that the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli tribes flourished in the highlands, blending artistry, spiritual rituals, and sustainable agriculture into their daily lives. Dumalandalan's warrior spirit created the Iranons and Maranaos, communities that combined martial prowess with devotion to Islam, thriving around the lakes and highlands of Lanio. Finally, Gumabonabon's unwavering dedication to ancestral faith led to the establishment of the Sabanan in the mountains of Misamis and Samboanga, communities that resisted assimilation and preserved their traditions for centuries. Despite the differences in faith, location, and societal structures, the bloodline of the five brothers united these diverse tribes. Shared ancestry became a subtle, yet powerful thread connecting communities that were geographically dispersed and culturally distinct. Oral histories, rituals, and legends emphasized common origins, reminding each tribe of its roots in a single family whose decisions, struggles, and leadership shaped Mindanao's destiny. This unity, through diversity, became a defining feature of the island's history, highlighting both the resilience and adaptability of its people. Although the five brothers' descendants settled in different regions and followed divergent paths, interactions between tribes remained frequent and significant. Trade routes, marriage alliances, and communal festivals created networks of cultural exchange, linking the highlands, river valleys, and lakes. For instance, the Mandaya and Blaan communities interacted with neighboring groups, exchanging agricultural techniques, weaving patterns, and ritual practices. The Maranaos and Iranons maintained strategic relationships with the Maguindanaons, trading goods and sharing knowledge of governance, warfare, and Islamic teachings. Even the Sabanan, though geographically isolated, were connected to other tribes through family ties, occasional trade, and shared ancestry stories. These exchanges reinforced a sense of belonging and common heritage, ensuring that despite differences in faith and customs, the tribes recognized their collective roots. Oral histories often narrated the deeds of the five brothers, emphasizing the moral lessons inherent in their choices: courage, devotion, preservation of culture, and respect for both land and people. These stories were performed through songs, dances, rituals, and communal storytelling, transmitting lessons across generations. The shared heritage also played a role in conflict resolution and alliances. When disputes arose over territory or resources, references to common ancestry and historical ties often helped mediate tensions. Leaders invoked the legacy of the five brothers to remind communities of their shared origins, encouraging cooperation and peaceful coexistence. This blending of cultural memory, diplomacy, and spirituality helped sustain the balance and unity of Mindanao's diverse tribal landscape, demonstrating how lineage and tradition could guide both identity and political interaction. The legacy of the five brothers endures not only in the physical settlements and governance structures they established, but also in the collective consciousness of Mindanao's peoples. Each tribe honors its founder through rituals, oral histories, and cultural practices, keeping alive the memory of courage, leadership, and devotion. Mirilirilid is remembered for independence and connection to the land. Tabunaway for faith, leadership, and political foresight. Mamalo for wisdom and cultural preservation. Dumalandalan for strength and martial skill. And Gumabonabon for fidelity to tradition and autonomy. This shared history offers a framework for understanding the interconnectedness of Mindanao's tribes. It demonstrates that diversity in language, belief, and social structure does not preclude unity. Rather, it emphasizes the richness and resilience of a society shaped by common origins. Modern Mindanao, with its complex tapestry of tribes, cultures, and religions, still reflects the influence of these ancestral choices. Festivals, storytelling, governance structures, and spiritual practices across the island carry echoes of the five brothers' legacies, reminding each community of its roots in courage, wisdom, and the pursuit of cultural survival. Ultimately, the five brothers symbolize the enduring power of family, tradition, and leadership. Their story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity of one family's decisions to shape the destinies of generations. The tribes of Mindanao, though varied in appearance, belief, and practice, remain bound by a shared ancestry that continues to inform identity, community cohesion, and the moral fabric of the island. The descendants of the five brothers spread across Mindanao, each tribe adapting to the unique geographic features of their territories while maintaining connections to their ancestral practices. Mirilirilid's lineage, the Manobos and Bagobos, settled deep in the hinterlands of Davao Province. These highlands and valleys provided fertile soil for agriculture, abundant forest resources for sustenance, and natural barriers that protected the tribes from external invasions. They built villages with structures harmonized to the landscape, often elevated to prevent flooding and surrounded by gardens and forests that provided both food and medicinal plants. Tabunaway Maguindanaons settled along the Cotabato River Plains, a region with rich soil and access to trade routes. Here, they could cultivate large fields, establish permanent settlements, and form political structures, such as the Sultanate. The river systems not only provided water for agriculture, but also served as transportation routes, facilitating trade, communication, and strategic defense. Maguindanaon settlements were often fortified and carefully planned to accommodate both social governance and spiritual spaces, reflecting the integration of faith into daily life. The Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli, descendants of Mamalo, occupied the highland regions where terraced fields were carved into slopes, forests provided game and resources, and rivers supplied water for irrigation and rituals. Dumalandalan's Iranons and Maranaos settled around lakes and highlands, using the abundant aquatic resources and fertile lands for sustenance, while building communities designed to withstand both natural and human threats. Finally, Gumabonabon's Subanen thrived in mountainous regions of Mount Malandang and Samboanga, isolated but well adapted to the rugged terrain, preserving customs and establishing settlements that blended harmoniously with nature. Each tribe's rituals and cultural practices were deeply connected to their environment. For the Manobos and Bagobos, ceremonies often centered around agricultural cycles, such as planting and harvest, and included offerings to ancestral spirits to ensure the fertility of the land. Sacred groves, rivers, and mountains were integral to spiritual life, with elders guiding ritual performances to maintain harmony between humans and nature. The Maguindanaons, as Islamic converts, integrated religious observances into their daily lives. Mosques became centers of community life, and festivals such as Eid were celebrated alongside traditional cultural practices. Their laws and rituals reflected a combination of faith and political governance, ensuring that religion, culture, and societal order were intertwined. Likewise, the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli maintained a rich tapestry of ceremonies that celebrated life events, agricultural productivity, and ancestral reverence. Music, dance, weaving, and oral storytelling were essential, not just as entertainment, but as a means of transmitting history, morality, and cultural knowledge. The Iranons and Maranaos held rituals connected to the lakes and highlands, celebrating water as a source of life, spiritual guidance, and communal prosperity. Martial traditions were often incorporated into these ceremonies, highlighting the balance between strength and spirituality. The Subanen, isolated in mountains and forests, practiced rituals dedicated to Megayep, the ancestral spirit. Ceremonies involved offerings, prayers, and communal gatherings that reinforced social cohesion and a spiritual bond between humans and nature. Across all tribes, these practices reflect an intimate understanding of the land and an enduring connection to ancestral wisdom. Geography played a crucial role in shaping each tribe's resilience and adaptability. For tribes in fertile lowlands like the Maguindanaons, adaptation involved both agricultural innovation and political strategy, creating centralized communities capable of defense and trade. Highland tribes, such as the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli, developed techniques such as terracing, forest management, and sustainable hunting, ensuring long-term survival in rugged terrain. The Iranons and Maranaos adapted to the lakes and highlands by combining fishing, aquaculture, and agriculture, while maintaining defensive and religious structures. For the Subanen, isolation became both a challenge and a strength. Their settlements were strategically located to provide security, access to resources, and cultural continuity. They developed skills in navigation, forestry, and self-defense, allowing them to resist external pressures while preserving their traditions. Adaptation also extended to social and spiritual systems. Elders and leaders guided the tribes in balancing innovation with tradition. Oral histories, rituals, and moral codes ensured that even as the environment, political landscape, or external influence changed, the core identity of each tribe remained intact. By harmonizing with the land and responding to challenges, The descendants of the five brothers ensured that their communities were not only surviving, but thriving, demonstrating the enduring interplay between geography, culture, and resilience in shaping Mindanao's history. The descendants of the five brothers, while united by bloodline, were spread across diverse terrains with distinct cultures, faiths, and socio-political systems. Inevitably, these differences sometimes led to conflict over land, resources, and influence. In the lowlands, the Maguindanaons, with their organized sultanate and military capabilities, occasionally clashed with neighboring tribes such as the Iranons or even Mandaya settlements when disputes arose over river boundaries, fishing rights, or trade routes. Despite these conflicts, leadership often emphasized restraint, negotiation, and strategic alliances to minimize unnecessary bloodshed while asserting territorial rights. In the highlands, the Manobos, Bagobos, Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli had their own rivalries. Competition for fertile land, hunting grounds, or spiritual sites sometimes triggered skirmishes. However, these communities valued honor and kinship, ensuring that warfare was governed by customs and rituals. Elders often mediated disputes, invoking shared ancestry to remind conflicting parties of common roots. The Subanen, though isolated in the mountains, occasionally defended their territories against encroachments, whether from other tribes or later from colonial forces. Their knowledge of the terrain and strategic use of natural barriers gave them a defensive advantage, making them formidable opponents even in small numbers. Despite conflicts, a unique pattern emerged. The knowledge of shared ancestry, stories of the five brothers, and oral traditions often mitigated violence. Leaders and elders invoked these stories to remind tribes that disputes could be resolved without undermining kinship ties. Even in the heat of battle, rituals and negotiations reflected an underlying recognition that unity, though sometimes strained, was rooted in a shared lineage that could guide decision-making and maintain intertribal stability. While conflict was inevitable, alliances among the tribes played a crucial role in sustaining peace, trade, and cultural exchange. Maranaos and Iranons, sharing Dumalandalan as a common ancestor, frequently coordinated defense strategies, cultural events, and trade networks. Similarly, the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli, descendants of Mamalo, maintained alliances through marriage, shared rituals, and cooperative agricultural projects. These alliances were both strategic and symbolic, ensuring that the cultural heritage and territorial integrity of each tribe were preserved. The Maguindanaons, despite their Islamic governance and centralized sultanate, engaged in diplomacy with surrounding tribes, particularly when trade routes or territorial disputes arose. Tribute systems, negotiated agreements, and ceremonial gatherings helped manage relationships, maintaining a balance of power. The Subanen, though physically distant, also engaged in occasional alliances or neutral agreements, particularly when trade or mutual defense became necessary. The elders of each community emphasized that respecting traditions, maintaining communication, and observing spiritual obligations were vital to sustaining alliances. Shared ancestry provided a framework for diplomacy. Leaders regularly invoked the stories of the five brothers to emphasize common origin and moral responsibility. These narratives reinforced the notion that, despite differences in faith, governance, or geographic location, each tribe's actions should honor ancestral bonds. This approach created a system of ethical diplomacy, where negotiations and alliances were informed not just by practical concerns, but by a cultural and spiritual understanding of kinship, history, and communal responsibility. The recognition of shared ancestry contributed significantly to cultural cohesion across Mindanao. Even tribes separated by mountains, rivers, and lakes maintained awareness of their connections. Festivals, marriages, and trade often included rituals that referenced common origins. Oral histories celebrated the deeds of the five brothers, emphasizing lessons of courage, leadership, spiritual devotion, and the preservation of culture. These stories reinforced social norms, provided guidance for leaders, and created a moral framework for interactions both within and between tribes. For instance, during ceremonial events, leaders of various tribes might recount how Mirilirilid preserved independence, how Tabunaway championed faith, how Mamalo protected tradition, how Dumalandalan exemplified martial skill, and how Gumabonabon ensured ancestral freedom. Such recitations were not merely symbolic. They fostered respect, mutual recognition, and a sense of collective responsibility. Intertribal cooperation in trade, defense, and cultural preservation often invoked these shared narratives to reinforce solidarity and ethical governance. Through centuries of negotiation, occasional conflict, and strategic alliances, the tribes of Mindanao maintained a complex network of relationships anchored in shared lineage. This dual system of cultural cohesion and practical governance allowed the descendants of the five brothers to thrive across diverse geographic and social landscapes. It ensured that Mindanao's tribes were not just independent entities, but part of a broader familial and historical framework, illustrating how shared ancestry could guide diplomacy, cooperation, and the long-term survival of distinct cultural identities. The spread of Islam in Mindanao, initiated by Shariff Kabunsuan and embraced by Tabunaway and Dumalandalan, created a unique cultural fusion across the island. Tribes that converted to Islam, such as the Maguindanaons, Maranaos, and Iranons, began integrating religious principles into their daily lives while still retaining many aspects of ancestral traditions. Islam provided a structured system of laws, moral guidelines, and spiritual rituals, which complemented the existing social structures of the tribes. Mosques became not only centers of worship, but also hubs for education, diplomacy, and community governance. Despite this integration, the older customs of the tribes did not vanish. Ancestor worship, respect for natural spirits, and ritualized storytelling continued to shape social behavior. Festivals and ceremonies, which had originally been dedicated to spirits like Megayep, were adapted to include Islamic teachings, prayers, and moral instruction. This blending allowed communities to honor both faiths without forsaking either. Leaders often acted as both spiritual and political figures, mediating disputes, ensuring adherence to religious practices, and preserving cultural norms. The result was a dynamic cultural synthesis. Islamic principles guided daily life, governance, and jurisprudence, while ancestral rituals preserved communal identity and moral continuity. This integration was particularly evident in marriage ceremonies, harvest celebrations, and rites of passage, where elements of both traditions coexisted harmoniously. By weaving together faith and heritage, the tribes created resilient social frameworks that allowed them to thrive despite colonial pressures and internal challenges. Rituals across Mindanao evolved to reflect this synthesis of faith and tradition. In Maguindanaon communities, Eid celebrations were marked by the reading of Islamic texts, communal prayers, and social feasting. Yet, elements of older customs persisted. The invocation of ancestors, symbolic dances, and offerings to honor past leaders and spirits. Similarly, the Iranons and Maranaos maintained water-based rituals and martial ceremonies alongside Islamic observances, linking spiritual devotion with communal defense. The Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli, who had remained less influenced by Islam, selectively adopted Islamic practices while preserving the majority of ancestral rites. They blended prayers, symbolic gestures, and ethical principles from Islam into existing ceremonies, such as rice planting, harvest festivals, and healing rituals. Music, dance, and oral storytelling continued to narrate the deeds of ancestors, including the five brothers, emphasizing lessons of bravery, wisdom, and leadership. Even the Sabanan, isolated in the mountains and largely non-Muslim, experienced indirect influence. Trade, intermarriage, and diplomacy with Muslim tribes introduced elements of Islamic practice that were sometimes incorporated for practical reasons. Ritual etiquette, negotiation protocols, or ceremonial symbolism, while the core belief in Megayep and ancestral spirits remained central. Across Mindanao, this adaptive ritualistic evolution ensured cultural continuity while allowing tribes to navigate a changing socio-religious landscape. The integration of Islam and ancestral beliefs extended beyond rituals into governance, social organization, and identity formation. Among the Maguindanaons, Maranaos, and Iranons, Islamic law informed political decisions, inheritance, and conflict resolution, yet customary code from ancestral traditions continued to govern social conduct, dispute mediation, and leadership succession. Leaders were expected to uphold both spiritual and cultural responsibilities, embodying principles of justice, morality, and ancestral respect. This synthesis created resilient societies. While the Sabanan maintained independence through geographic isolation, their values and governance mirrored this hybrid approach. Leadership combined martial skill, spiritual oversight, and cultural stewardship. Across the highlands and lowlands, communities drew strength from the complementary integration of faith and tradition. Identity became a multidimensional construct, rooted in ancestry, shaped by belief, and strengthened by shared history. By weaving together Islamic teachings and ancestral customs, Mindanao's tribes developed a cultural fabric that was both flexible and enduring. Rituals, governance structures, and moral codes became deeply intertwined, reflecting an adaptive yet consistent identity. This synthesis not only preserved the legacies of the five brothers, but also allowed successive generations to thrive amidst changing political, environmental, and social landscapes. The people of Mindanao, though diverse in belief and practice, remained unified through a shared understanding of heritage, faith, and communal responsibility. The arrival of Spanish colonizers in Mindanao during the 16th and 17th centuries introduced new political, religious, and economic pressures on the indigenous tribes. Unlike in Luzon or the Visayas, the Spanish faced significant challenges in establishing authority over the diverse and decentralized communities of Mindanao. The descendants of the five brothers, Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon, were already entrenched in their respective territories, with strong social cohesion, martial capability, and spiritual traditions guiding their communities. The Spanish sought to extend their influence through a combination of military campaigns, missionary activity, and alliances with compliant local leaders. However, the tribes of Mindanao were neither monolithic nor easily subdued. The Maguindanaons, under Islamic Sultanate governance, resisted conversion and central control. The Iranons and Maranaos, fierce warriors accustomed to defending their lakes and highlands, engaged in strategic defensive campaigns to protect their territories. Meanwhile, the Sabanan, guided by the legacy of Gumabonabon and Timuay Imbing, used the mountains and forests to maintain independence and preserve ancestral customs. Spanish attempts at colonization often met with limited success, forcing them to rely on negotiation, tribute, and local intermediaries rather than outright conquest. The indigenous tribes leveraged knowledge of the terrain, social networks, and military preparedness to assert autonomy. Resistance took many forms: raids on colonial outposts, defensive fortifications, and strategic retreats into difficult terrain. At the same time, some tribes strategically engaged with the Spanish when trade, protection, or diplomacy offered tangible benefits, demonstrating flexibility without surrendering core cultural or political autonomy. Resistance movements across Mindanao were both organized and symbolic, reflecting the intertwined nature of spirituality, martial culture, and governance inherited from the Five Brothers. The Maguindanaons, led by sultans and local datus, coordinated attacks on Spanish garrisons, targeting supply lines and reinforcing Islamic institutions. Their ability to mobilize warriors quickly, combined with strategic knowledge of river systems and plains, made them formidable opponents despite Spanish military technology. In the highlands, the Mandaya, Blaan, and Taboli similarly resisted Spanish incursions. These tribes, skilled in forest warfare, ambush tactics, and defensive construction, made colonial expansion arduous and costly. Oral histories recall legendary raids and skirmishes where smaller tribal forces successfully repelled larger Spanish contingents, often using spiritual rituals to inspire courage and reinforce community unity. The Iranons and Maranaos, adept at both land and water-based warfare, engaged in defensive campaigns around lakes and rivers, leveraging natural fortifications to maintain independence and protect cultural heritage. The Subanen maintained perhaps the most effective isolationist strategy. Mountains, dense forests, and hidden valleys allowed them to avoid direct confrontation while preserving cultural and spiritual integrity. Leaders like Timue Imbing and later Timue Bung Imbing organized defense networks and trained warriors to respond swiftly to threats, ensuring that colonial influence remained minimal. Even when occasional negotiation or tribute was necessary, the Subanen maintained autonomy in governance, spiritual practice, and social organization, demonstrating the enduring impact of Gumabonabon's decision to preserve independence. While armed resistance was a key strategy, negotiation and diplomacy were equally important. Leaders across Mindanao, from the sultans of Maguindanao to the elders of the Subanen, understood the value of strategic engagement. They leveraged the shared ancestry of the Five Brothers and established intertribal alliances to strengthen their bargaining power against Spanish authorities. Shared lineage reinforced trust between tribes, enabling coordinated negotiations, collective defense, and mutual support. Tributary arrangements, ceremonial alliances, and selective collaboration allowed tribes to gain concessions while avoiding full assimilation. Missionaries were sometimes tolerated to gain access to trade, medical aid, or political recognition, but indigenous leadership structures remained intact. Rituals, oral histories, and ancestral ceremonies reinforced the moral and spiritual authority of local leaders, ensuring that colonial pressure could not erase tribal identity. Through a combination of military resilience, geographic advantage, and sophisticated diplomacy, the tribes of Mindanao preserved autonomy during the Spanish period. They protected their lands, faith, and cultural practices while selectively engaging with external powers to their benefit. The legacy of the Five Brothers, Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon, remained evident. Leadership, courage, spiritual guidance, and respect for tradition continued to shape the trajectory of Mindanao's diverse tribes in the face of colonial intrusion. The story of Mindanao is, at its core, a story of one family whose choices shaped the destinies of an entire island. Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon left indelible marks on the landscape, culture, and spiritual life of Mindanao's tribes. Each brother's path, from flight, conversion, or steadfast preservation of ancestral faith, produced a unique lineage that would become the Manobos, Bagobos, Maguindanaons, Mandaya, Blaan, Iranons, Maranaos, and Subanen. The unifying legacy of the five brothers is reflected not only in bloodlines, but in cultural, social, and political structures. Despite differences in faith and geographic distribution, the tribes share moral frameworks, oral histories, and ancestral wisdom that trace back to a common origin. This shared ancestry acts as a symbolic and practical bond, providing a framework for intertribal diplomacy, ethical governance, and cultural cohesion. Leaders regularly invoke the story of the brothers to foster unity, mediate disputes, and reinforce collective identity, ensuring that Mindanao's diverse communities recognize themselves as branches of one family tree. Shared heritage also served as a guide during times of external pressure, when Spanish, American, or other colonial powers attempted to assert control. The tribes drew upon the legacy of the five brothers to reinforce resistance, negotiate strategically, and maintain autonomy. Knowledge of their ancestry was not just historical. It was a source of empowerment, a moral compass, and a cultural glue that ensured continuity across generations. The survival of the Subanen, Maguindanaons, Maranaos, Iranons, Mandaya, Blaan, Manobos, and Bagobos into modern times is a testament to their adaptability and resilience. Traditions, rituals, and oral histories continue to be passed down, even in the face of urbanization, globalization, and modernization. Festivals, dances, weaving, and music remain central to communal identity, while sacred sites, rivers, and mountains are preserved as symbols of ancestral connection and spiritual guidance. Education has become a bridge between tradition and modernity. Tribal leaders and educators teach both the history of the five brothers and contemporary skills, ensuring that youth understand their heritage while navigating modern socio-political realities. Language preservation programs, cultural festivals, and documentation of oral histories help sustain the narratives that anchor each tribe to its ancestral roots. Even as political and religious landscapes evolve, the principles established by the five brothers, leadership, courage, respect for tradition, and spiritual devotion, remain influential. This commitment to cultural preservation is particularly evident in intergenerational storytelling. Elders recount tales of bravery, strategic thinking, and moral decision-making, reinforcing ethical values and social norms. Children learn not only the names of the five brothers, but also the lessons behind their choices: the courage to preserve autonomy, the wisdom to balance faith and tradition, and the responsibility to maintain communal harmony. Through these stories, the legacy of Mindanao's founders continues to thrive, ensuring that the moral and cultural fabric of the island remains intact. The history of Mindanao's tribes, woven through the lives of the five brothers and their descendants, offers a profound moral. Unity and diversity is possible through respect for heritage, courage, and ethical leadership. Despite differences in faith, geography, and social structure, these tribes share an enduring connection rooted in bloodline, ancestral wisdom, and cultural values. This connection enabled them to withstand external pressures, resolve conflicts, and adapt to changing political, social, and environmental conditions. Mindanao's history teaches that cultural identity is not static. It evolves, integrates, and adapts, yet remains anchored in core principles. The five brothers demonstrate that individual choices, whether to resist, embrace, or preserve, can shape entire communities for centuries. Their story underscores the importance of leadership that honors tradition while navigating change, the value of cultural preservation as a source of resilience, and the power of shared heritage to unite diverse communities. Today, the descendants of Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon continue to honor their legacy through rituals, governance, art, and storytelling. Their enduring presence across Mindanao is a living testament to survival, identity, and the moral strength of one family that became the foundation of an island's cultural and spiritual richness. The history of the five brothers is more than a tale of division. It is a story of courage, wisdom, and unity that continues to shape Mindanao's past, present, and future. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible journey into the history of Mindanao, where the lives and choices of five brothers, Mirilirilid, Tabunaway, Mamalo, Dumalandalan, and Gumabonabon, gave birth to the island's great tribes, each unique yet forever connected through bloodline, culture, and shared legacy. Today, you have witnessed how courage, faith, wisdom, and resilience shaped the Manobos, Bagobos, Maguindanaons, Mandaya, Blaan, Iranons, Maranaos, and subordinate tribes across mountains, rivers, plains, and lakes, and how these communities maintain their identity through ritual, governance, and adaptation in the face of external pressures, from missionary influence to Spanish colonization and beyond. You have seen that the history of Mindanao is more than a story of separation or conflict. It is a story of survival, leadership, and the power of shared heritage. From Mirilirilid's pursuit of independence to Tabunaway's integration of faith, from Mamalo's preservation of ancestral rituals to Dumalandalan's warrior governance, and from Gumabonabon's unwavering fidelity to ancestral traditions. This history teaches us the value of courage, ethical leadership, unity, and cultural resilience. Every ritual, every story, and every battle reveals the depth of human decision-making, the significance of preserving identity, and the strength that comes from honoring your roots. We hope this journey has not only expanded your knowledge, but also inspired you to reflect on the importance of culture, ancestry, and leadership in shaping communities and societies. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the rich tapestry of Mindanao, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of History Teller YT, where we bring history to life, one story at a time. Stay tuned, stay curious, and join us again soon as we uncover more forgotten histories, hidden legacies, and timeless lessons from the past. Remember, history is not just about what happened. It's about the wisdom it leaves behind, the connections it reveals, and the inspiration it provides for the generations yet to come.